I returned home with the intention of surprising my wife, only to discover her in bed with another man. My world was turned upside down in that moment. I had never imagined my marriage would end in such a way. But what shocked me even more was her attempt to run over my new partner with a car. This was more than betrayal, this was madness. Welcome to the Love and Betrayed Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. I, 36, was married to my ex-wife 35, a female. Her name is Isabella. For 6 years our marriage was satisfactory. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad either. We met on Facebook and something clicked between us. Things were going well during the dating phase and I was extremely cautious about searching for red flags, because I grew up with a mother who was violent to my father and I didn't want to end up in a situation similar to that. I didn't see any warning signs, so we got married and everything was fine. Unfortunately, approximately 2 years into our marriage, we began having major disagreements about once a month. To be honest, it became exhausting, but I was determined to make things work because why not? We had a fantastic start to our relationship, so I was certain that we could figure out what was wrong and work things out. I recommended couples therapy several times, but after one session she refused to return. I believe she was dissatisfied because the therapist did not appear to be on her side. However, it became clear that she possessed a temper which she had not before displayed. It was part of what we intended to investigate, but we never had more than one session. I assumed it was related to her father's death, but I couldn't be certain she would never break anything or hurt someone. However, it was just extremely noisy. Anyway, we soon settled into a groove of simply coexisting with one another. There were still some wonderful times, but it wasn't the same as our previous strong, thrilling connection. However, there was no doubt that I was still in love with her. I realized that if nothing changed in the next few years, we'd probably end up divorcing. I wanted to give it a shot, though, because I never thought marriage was something you could just walk into and out of, obviously ignoring abuse, infidelity and other big deal breakers. I believe that is sufficient background. I am not the highest-ranking employee. Where I work, I would describe myself as painfully mid-level. However, I frequently have to travel to other states for work, and what I'm about to discuss was one of those times. I went to an expo and while it was a 4-day event, the company representatives there were called back after 3 days due to a work emergency that required more hands on deck. As a nice little boy, I rushed back to my job. The only difficulty was that I didn't inform my wife that I was returning. Most of the reason was that I wanted to surprise her. Things had gotten to the point where I felt compelled to rekindle the spark, because we were simply coasting and not attempting to be spontaneous. When I got back, I bought the flowers I knew she liked and went home. Obviously I had my keys, so I locked myself inside. I knew she was scheduled to be home that day, so when I didn't see her in the living room or kitchen, I walked straight to her bedroom and opened the door right there. I noticed a man on top of Isabella doing exactly what he was doing. I could hear her making sounds and regrettably the entire vision refused to leave my head. The change in lighting as I opened the door made them realize I was there and they both jerked up in surprise. I stood in the doorway as both of these people hurried to put on their clothes. The man changed into his underpants, grabbed the rest of his things and attempted to push through me in the doorway to the room. I'm not sure if he knew she was married. I'm not sure if he was her normal partner, but in that instant I found myself with one hand on his throat. I wasn't attempting to strangle him, but I was clutching tightly. I slapped him twice. I still don't understand why I chose to beat him that way, but it is what came out of me. He appeared stunned at first, then determined to fight back, but I let grip of his neck and he departed. At that point I returned my attention to Isabella, who was attempting to put her bra back on. I was furious and I stood at my feet for hours, staring at her as she said nothing and dressed back up. She avoided looking at me and I honestly didn't know what to do as she fought to straighten her hair. She said the most ridiculous thing to me. "Why are you even back?" In that moment, I felt like doing what I had just done to her in a fair manner. I really wanted to punch her for some reason. I couldn't move, though, so I just stood there like an idiot. She did not meet my gaze and she whispered, You weren't meant to return. Beneath her breath, I still didn't say anything and she appeared to lose control at that point. You were not supposed to be back. It is your fault for not informing me that you were returning, else you would not have noticed this. I asked you for an open relationship and you declined. I have needs. I tried to do things without hurting you, but you had to return unexpectedly. Why? At that time, I walked across the room, grabbed her by the collar of the shirt she'd just put on and lifted my fist to strike her. I don't know if I would have stopped if she hadn't looked scared, but I did, even when seen away of context. That moment does not make me proud. However, I don't look back on it with pride. A part of me secretly wishes I had struck her just for the satisfaction. I then released go of her and went away. I heard her yapping behind me. Were you going to hit me? Really, this is why I don't love you anymore. You call yourself a man, but you aren't. You make me sick and so much more. At the time, I couldn't understand why you'd say those things to someone who had almost hit you, but later on it appeared like she was just trying to irritate me and get me to punch her. That way, she could put me in jail or whatever. I simply went out of the house. I couldn't deal with it or think about what I could have done to her, since the circumstances made me feel like I was about to snap. There was a fragrance in the bedroom and throughout the home. I found a friend's home to crash and he was quite empathetic to what I'd been through. He suggested that I divorce her as soon as possible, and while I wasn't ready to do so because lawyers are expensive and I earned significantly more than she did, I was leery of alimony in her favor. He said that if I could provide proof of her infidelity, I might be able to secure a lower alimony payment. I felt divorce was the best option. Therefore, I don't believe my hesitation stemmed from my desire to work things out with her. I'm not that idiotic. I believe Isabella snapped at that point because she began texting me about how I had a small penis, but he had a larger penis was better, and so on. I believe she was really enraged that I had caught her and she had no sensible emotional reaction to it. She blamed me for upsetting her nice relationship with her fair partner, and this was how she opted to deal with her emotions. For some reason, my friend was present and instructed me to screenshot the texts as she sent them, which I did, and about a minute after her rant, he made such a good call. I watched all of the texts be unsent. I'm not sure if she had a little moment of clarity, but she obviously had second thoughts. After that, she just wrote messages cursing me out with no indication of her infidelity. My companion produced many cocktails for me all night till I fell asleep. About 2 weeks later, I finally found a divorce lawyer who was in my price range and who I felt extremely comfortable with. I showed him what I had and he suggested we'd be able to do something significant with it. I felt comfortable about it, though he didn't seem convinced that I'd be let free without paying anything. He told me that he would do his best. She was served with papers and took around a month to respond to them. I believe that was a purposeful decision, since it was obvious at that point that neither of us wanted to be in this marriage with each other. The divorce proceedings began and Isabella was being absolute, but only through them. She was making things more difficult than they needed to be at every opportunity she had at the time. We had been separated for several months, so it made no sense. She was attempting to frustrate me and it was effective. At this point I was already attempting to get over her. I'll admit that I started with a lot of one-night stands, but I realized they weren't for me, one of the reasons I never agreed to an open relationship with her. I've always been a own you woman sort of man. I used to read a lot before life and job stole that away from me. But I was looking for serenity in things that did not come in a bottle. So somewhere in the middle of the divorce drama, I found myself at a bookstore. I was seeking for some fiction to read, but I had been away from it for so long that I had no idea where to begin. There was a lady in the same section as me, so I inquired what she would recommend if I wanted to read science fiction. She asked me what I liked. I told her, and before you knew it, we were talking for hours about books and her favorite series. I suppose. We stood there for about 30 minutes before I chose a book based on her recommendation and obtained her phone number. I'm smiling as I think about how my interaction with her was like a bomb to everything I'd gone through. We began dating soon after, and I was quite open with her about the fact that I was going through a divorce, but it didn't appear to bother her in any way. She stated she was glad I was open about it and that it didn't bother her. She was distracting me from the misery in my life at the time, but I was relieved that I had not sought her out as a distraction. We met naturally, and she turned out to be a wonderful person. The divorce was dragging on and I really wanted to be done with it, but Isabella clearly didn't. At one point, I had been dating the lady I met at the bookshop, Lily, for 5 months and I was still suffering with the divorce. However, this is when everything began to spiral out of control. Lily and I had a lovely day in town and we were headed to our car in a shopping center parking lot. At this point everything happened so quickly. I heard a car's engine crank suddenly and a vehicle approached us, but more towards Lily. I attempted to move her out of the way by jerking her arm, but she got struck in the outstretched leg. I can't imagine how it felt to hear her cry in pain, and I noticed that her leg was shattered above the ankle. I was going to call 911 on my phone when the car hit another one hard and reversed. I faced Lily and I on the floor and I had to drag her between the automobiles before the vehicle moved forward and collided with another car. People's attention was pulled to the scene and they were getting closer. At that point someone came out of the driver's seat and I recognized Isabella. It probably made the most sense at the time, other from the fact that it was a psychopath. But at the same time I was shocked, since there was no way she hadn't just tried to kill us, or at least Lily. She moved threateningly towards us, but a bystander stopped her. To be completely honest, I thought she had lost her mind. I could not have imagined her level of anger and madness, the extent of attempting to run over Lily. I couldn't explain it away, regardless of how much I despise her. The police arrived shortly after, along with an ambulance, and transported Lily to the hospital. Isabella was arrested and she yelled in my way. "It hasn't even been a year and you're already strolling around with a..." It was terrifying but also perplexing because it appeared like she had gotten the short end of the stick. When I discovered her cheating and divorced her for it, she acted like a victim, as if I hadn't really walked in on her sleeping with a man. It was one of the most traumatic events in my life. Lily could have perished that day. She had a full recovery, spoiler alert, and I am grateful about it. When I told her it was my soon-to-be ex-wife, I knew it was done. Who wants to spend the rest of their life with a mad lady attempting to kill them? But all she stated was that as long as she was in prison, there would be nothing to be concerned about. Of course, authorities opted to pursue the case, especially since the parking lot had multiple cameras that captured the entire incident. Apparently, she had drove past us once and I believe she recognized us. She then circled around and tried to strike Lily. She made a definite decision and never questioned it. At that moment our divorce proceedings were effectively halted due to her criminal situation. Being a prominent player in a serious court case is not enjoyable. In case you thought jury duty was as terrible as it could get, it lasted a long time and interfered with my employment, which I disliked. She was not worth the stress, however, the prosecutors found it to be a piece of cake. There were eyewitness reports and CCTV evidence, and both Lily and I testified about what transpired. There were other accounts, but she was found guilty of all of them, the most serious being attempted murder. There was no doubt that she was attempting to kill someone with a car, especially after her second attempt to crash into US 12 years in prison. Honestly, I was surprised it wasn't longer, but the allegation was that she expressed regret for her acts. I still believe it was an act and that she had no criminal background. She may potentially be released early if she was a good girl in prison and wanted extra time. But 12 years in prison was a long time for someone in their mid-30s, and she still had to attend her divorce proceedings remotely. Despite the fact that her lawyer represented her totally at times, things began to move in the proper direction right away, and with the final piece of the puzzle that she had wonderfully served to us by attempting to murder my girlfriend, she received nothing as an absolute nothing. The judge refused to even consider rewarding such behavior with anything that was not hers. From the start, it brought a tremendous smile to my face, since everything seemed to have suddenly clicked into place at that instant, despite the anguish she had inflicted. Isabella has been absent from my life and it feels as if she has vanished forever, despite the fact that I know she will return. However, being completely honest makes life a lot easier. I moved out of the old flat since it reminded me of her infidelity, but Lily and I acquired a place and have been really happy together. Lily quips that she was glad to make the sacrifice to assist me throw my ex away. I'm not sure what I might have done better. Maybe I could have left her when I learned she had a temper, but other than that I have no idea. All I can say is that you should avoid crazy ladies, even if they weren't crazy to begin with. I'm delighted I'm better off in the end. That's what matters. I'm looking forward to reading your comments and seeing your jokes. That's one of the reasons I adore this community, finding your wife in bed with another person. Ouch, this is the stuff of nightmare maze. Then comes the full open relationship request. After being caught, talk about adding insult to injury, discuss how your marriage is changing either for the better or worse, directly into attempted vehicular homicide territory. Who knew until death? Do us part, you get quite literal. Imagine explaining this to your friends over a pint. Yeah. So my ex-wife attempted to run over my new girlfriend in a mall parking lot. It turns out that the phrase "till death" in our vows may have been taken too seriously, and let us not forget the courtroom drama. Shake my head. Attempted murder wasn't exactly on the divorce agenda, was it? Here is the next story. He awoke to find that his phone had 10 missed calls and an equal amount of voicemail messages. He didn't identify the area code. After receiving multiple spam calls from Chinese robo-marketing, he instructed his phone to forward strange numbers to voicemail, typically Beijing, but he never left messages. His daughters were still sleeping, so he started listening to the messages. It was then that he learned his wife Ava was not in Jacksonville, Florida, visiting her parents and sister for the weekend, but rather in the burn unit of a hospital in Boulder, Colorado. Ethan went silent for a moment. His phone was also sending him notifications of news updates. Normally this was unpleasant, but the effort to disable this function never seemed worthwhile. Something about flames remained in his mind. He remembered seeing a news headline with the words "fire in Boulder." When his phone turned on that morning, he proceeded to the phone's home screen and noticed the news headline: "Devastating forest fire destroys Boulder suburb overnight." Interesting. Ethan would be the first to confess that he wasn't always the sharpest tool in the shed, but he could only think of one reason why his wife, Ava, of 8 years, would lie about her weekend plans. He purposefully slowed his pace. There's no need to haste. He brewed delicious coffee. The girls would not be awake for at least an hour. He delivered coffee to Awry's office in the dining room and took her laptop. It turned out that it was now password locked, a password he didn't recognize, but Ava was disorganized and sluggish, so he looked for a password written on a scrap of paper and discovered it in the bottom of a little writing desk drawer. After obtaining access, he saw that she had not even closed her email browsers. She had simply shut down her computer, relying on a fresh password and clearly her belief that Ethan would not invade privacy. All of the assumptions that existed in this household before to this morning were no longer valid. Ethan reasoned, and it was true. Everything had changed. She had been visiting her college ex-boyfriend, Derek Grant, and his house in Boulder on weekends when Derek's wife was away. This was the gentleman who had destroyed Ava's heart by falling in love with and marrying another lady. It appeared that he felt regret about the abandoned woman over time, or perhaps just lust. The emails contained many specifics, the most of which were simply confirmations of arrival timings. Ethan hypothesized that they poured their hearts out to each other on the phone. One intriguing fact surfaced. Her parents and sister were aware of her affair and agreed to cover it up. This was not in the emails, but rather in an open conversation that was also left unlocked. Everyone thought she should marry Derek, who came from a wealthy family. Ethan was frozen as if watching a car wreck in slow motion and unable to look away. He took a big breath and relaxed a bit. It was necessary, or he could have punched holes in the house's drywall. When they answered, he contacted the Boulder hospital. He intuitively inquired whether Derek Grant was a patient. When they quizzed Ethan about his relationship with Mr. Grant, he claimed he was a friend. The operator then indicated she was unable to provide any information. That response revealed that the following patient was called Derek Grant. Ethan dialed the number left on his voicemail. There was a direct line to the hospital's reception. After identifying himself, the clerk informed him that Ava had been admitted with third-degree burns covering 80 of her body, including lung damage from smoke inhalation. The fire appears to have started abruptly in the drought-stricken area, quickly spreading in strong winds and shutting off the sole escape path. Over 100 homes were torched and damaged. "Sorry," Ethan replied. "This cannot be my wife. She is in Jacksonville, Florida. You must have entered wrong information." He hung up. Of course she was not in Boulder. He felt it, but he was not going to make things easy for anyone. He searched his wife's computer again and discovered Derek's social media page. Ava had actually made him one of her pals. There he discovered Derek's wife. She made a public message from her family home in San Diego asking for prayers after learning that her husband had been hospitalized in Boulder with severe burns. "I need those prayers answered by the God of vengeance." Ethan considered approaching Derek's wife over chat to introduce himself and convey what he had discovered. He left his phone number for lengthy time. Later he finished his coffee, he spotted another missed call. He didn't know the phone number, but there was a voicemail from Derek's wife. "Megan." Ethan called her back. "Missed. Is your real name Megan?" he had to ask. "Yes," she exhaled. "When I got married, I was concerned that this would happen. Derek rejected the woman I'm married for love. Now it's a full meltdown. You must be Reese's husband." "Yes, I knew about her when Derek and I met. He's been acting strange lately, but I did not understand why. Now everything becomes sense. Are you feeling the same way?" "Kind of. I am aware of Derek's situation, but Rainey's behavior was not suspicious. Therefore I did not detect anything." "Ethan, you take it gently. How do you handle that?" Megan responded. "You're talking calmly to me. I take pills. Derek is severely burned. They have already placed him in a medically induced coma. I lost my composure when I heard that. Now I'm just in shock, especially knowing the truth about what actually occurred." "What is your wife's story?" "Severe burns, that is all I know. I informed them that they couldn't beat her since my wife is in Florida." Megan chuckled. "Oh, the hospital's phoning again. Let me respond and remain in touch." She hung up and Ethan saved the number to his contacts. To prevent the spam blocker from routing the call to voicemail, Reese's father, Bob, placed a new call. "Wow, must have watched the news and become concerned, Ethan." "Yes." A pause ensued. Ethan and Bob had never liked each other and Ethan reciprocated. Bob disliked them, although they always appeared to communicate politely. Now courtesy seemed gone. "Ethan, did you hear from Ava?" Ethan paused. This question must have cost us Bob dearly in terms of morality. "Why should I hear from her? She's upstairs in her old room. Isn't she spending time with you? Your estranged wife and your other daughter." Bob recognized what Ethan knew. He exhaled. "Ethan, she genuinely adores you. I understand we've never gotten along." "Bob," Ethan interjected, his voice growing louder. "This is ridiculous, and before you continue talking irritate me even more. No, this I completely understand that I have never pleased. You were convinced I was worthy of your daughter. Your other daughter also treated me cruelly. I put up with it to maintain the peace. But now everything is over and I want to make this obvious. If you were standing in front of me right now, I'd hit you in the mouth until you spat your teeth. Damn you and your family too." "Hang on." There was really nothing else to say. "However, you can save time." He banned Bob's, as well as his mother and sister-in-law's phone numbers. "Dad, why are you yelling?" "Nicole," his daughter asked. As she entered the kitchen, her younger sister, Rebecca, followed her. Rebecca announced that Dad had spoken a foul word. "Really?" Nicole asked. "Say it again." "Father, I did not hear that." Ethan gave a smile. "What was the terrible word, Becky?" She frowned. "I can't recall. You probably misheard." Now let us eat breakfast. Today is pancake day. They had 3 pancakes and some orange juice. Then the 2 girls watched cartoons. After all, it was Saturday morning. The telephone rang again. It was Megan Grant. The tablets are functioning. What pills? He gasped. I told you about the ones I used to calm down. Well, they are not working. Why are you saying this, Miss Megan Grant? In the hospital they directed me to the location where Derek is receiving intensive treatment. The nurse placed me on speaker. She thought hearing my voice would assist Derek, even though he was in a coma and I lost it. I yelled at his girlfriend, who was also seriously burned and likely to die, and said it was his fault, and then, after we both receive life insurance benefits, we'll embark on an around-the trip and spend all of our time in bed to settle the score. His heart nearly stopped when he heard me, even if he is in a coma. Yes, that's difficult to say whether my screen caused that or whether it was simply a coincidence, but made it through. I apologize. She paused. Sorry, what are you apologizing for? Are you apologizing? His heart nearly stopped. Or are you apologizing? Still alive. Ethan's inclinations leaned toward brutality, but he controlled himself. I'm just sad that things turned out this way. I agree. She paused before asking, tell me about the cruise we are going on. Sorry, I'm not sure where that came from, but I'm still intrigued. That's probably accurate. She paused. Are you actually interested, Ethan? I've noticed on social media that you have a lovely face, but I haven't really followed you on the internet. If I had to spend time gaining revenge by sleeping with someone, you'd be an excellent candidate. Why are you asking? Do I have a chance? I do not know. She responded slowly. I've spent the time since I discovered he was cheating, wondering what was wrong with me. Knowing you are interested helps me feel a little better. In any case, you do not look very horrible. Ethan snorted. Ethans. That's good to hear, even if my wife obviously preferred your husband. Perhaps the problem isn't with us. I have similar thoughts. Megan Grant halted again. Have you ever pondered why they did that? I suppose it was because they believed they could get away with having an affair. That sounds overly straightforward, so what else could it be? Megan spoke decisively. Listen, we both have a lot to process, but please remain in touch. We are the only 2 people who understand how the other is feeling right now. Okay, I need to buy swim trunks and Bermuda shorts for the cruise. She chuckled. At least you're helping me feel better. Perhaps the medications are working. Reserve a room with a balcony. She chuckled again until then they hung up. Ethan noticed another voicemail. It came from the hospital again. He called back, connected with the nurse and entered the room. She also put him on speakerphone. It must be a different nurse than the Who Cares for Derek. Yet they all appear to follow the same set of medical establishment guidelines. Mr. Henry Becker, yes, I am Nurse Young. We're on speaker now. I am in the intensive care burn unit of the hospital. Your wife is here. She is terribly burned and in a medicated coma. She is next to me. We hope that the sound of your voice can help, even though she is unconscious. Ethan believed that the hospital would need to revise its normal protocols for dealing with the patient relatives after today's day, but he needed to ask, why do you believe that I wasn't present when she was brought in? One of my pals was present. She claimed your wife gripped her arm like a vice and refused to let go until they comprehended what she was requesting. Call my spouse. I'm terribly sorry. Your wife and the team used all of their strength and refused to let them do anything unless they convinced her they would deliver the message. Okay, too little, too late. Ethan thought, what do I say? He asked, tell her everything on her heart. The nurse spoke foolishly. Okay, thought Ethan. Then he added, listen, pathetic liar. He yelled over the phone to his wife. I pray you experience misery and spend eternity in hell with Derek, who is also departing. Just so you know, I'm planning to spend the entire life insurance money I get to seduce Derek's wife, and I'll never forgive you." The line was shut off. The nurse obviously didn't listen when he started, but she seemed to have snapped out of it, understood that if he continued at this rate, he would not reach his emotional balancing goals and would most likely feel guilty about what he had said. However, it was not the day Dad. "What does this mean?" Becky inquired, cuddling her teddy bear. "Oh, my little ones, it means deceiving someone." She contemplated this with a serious gaze. "When will Mom be home?" That's what truly enraged him. He feels compelled to inform his daughters of the situation. He should have considered it thoroughly, but he wasn't in the mood. Becky returned to the living room. Ethan watched her sit down in front of the television. Under no circumstances would he take the daughters to the hospital in Colorado to see their mother shrouded in bandages like a mummy. He didn't want them to have these memories. He had a week's worth of Disneyland tickets within 30 minutes, reservation at one of Mickey's hotels, and airline tickets. They were leaving the next morning. Nicole might have to miss some preschool, but that was fine. We received a call from the hospital. After receiving our tickets, Ava had a heart attack and died. All efforts to save her failed. Ethan inquired as to the particular time he yelled at her. "Perhaps you might advise Megan to try shouting Derek again." "No, allow her to sort things out herself." Ethan was eventually forced to transmit medical insurance information to the hospital in order for them to furnish him with death certificates. He called the local funeral home and scheduled a cremation for her burns. Ethan expected a reduction, but they informed him that they would still charge the full price. He asked them to mail in the ashes once they returned from Disney. The girls were disappointed that their mothers were not with them, but they were cheered up by enough sweets from the BBD boutique Derek held on until Thursday. Megan stopped shouting at him, which may have helped him stay following his death. Megan returned to Colorado to live with friends when her house burned down. She acted like a noble widow for the sake of her children. She told Ethan that she hadn't told them about Ava Tane. His children were older than Ethan's and they knew their father had been injured in the fire, so it would be more difficult to disregard all of this. Ethan girls had no idea he would keep the same spirit for a while, but it was still difficult not to say anything negative about their mother. Soon after they returned from Florida, a delivery man arrived at the door with two goods that required signatures. The first letter came from a relative. The second was a box containing Reese ashes. The letter requested that Reese's bones be provided so that they may organize a memorial service and burial in his hometown Florida. If Ethan didn't want to organize something where he resided, they must have contacted someone. He assumed the letter lacked an apology for covering up Ava. This truth made the subsequent decision simpler to accept. He recruited a teenage girl from the area to babysit the girls and left them telling to her about the Disney trip and showing her all of their stuff and images on the tablet. Then Ethan walked to a nearby national park carrying his ashes in a sack over his shoulder. Ethan drove to one of the park remote locations in a deep cinder block toilets instead of bathrooms. He photographed himself flushing the ashes down the toilet. Returning to the car, he wondered if some therapy would be useful, but the problem was he was no longer angry. Well, not angry enough to strike anyone. Ruining someone's reputation was another issue. He released a video on social media of himself flushing the ashes, along with an explanation. Following that, he questioned if the National Park Service would fine him for contaminating a toilet. If so, he would cheerfully pay it. He never contacted her relatives, but he noticed in the media that they held a funeral service in Jacksonville without him or his daughter. He informed the girls that their mother had an accident while she was away and would not be coming back. They took it as expected. Fortunate, they had amazing teachers at the daycare who assisted and encouraged them. The life insurance payout was satisfactory. Ava had more insurance than Ethan. Expected insurance benefits make it easier to restructure his employment life. He believed his daughters needed more fresh air, particularly in playgrounds. With a large number of children and attractive young mothers, many of whom sympathized with his tragic story, he played down awry's infidelity. He sought sympathy. Not pity, the girls began receiving invites to several playdates where moms invited their gorgeous single pals. He began to see the road forward. Ethan never met Megan Grant, though they did talk on the phone from time to time. Story 2. I, a 29-year-old male, was just divorced. My ex-wife, a 27-year-old woman, left me because of infidelity. My wife and I met at a mutual friend's housewarming celebration and instantly liked one another. She was sweet and educated, and as we got to know each other, my feelings for her grew. We went on several dates, as is customary for every love story, dated and married after 2 years of dating. If a clairvoyant had warned me that my wife would cheat on me, I would not have believed him. My wife and I were the kind of pair who wore identical clothing and held hands everywhere we went. We were always all over one another, and she loved the ground I walked on. Our marriage was enjoyable and pleasant, and we did a lot of exploring together. My wife was my first and sincere love. I had been in relationships during high school and college, but they were not serious. I was a bashful teenage boy and adult who struggled to maintain relationships, but it was much easier with my wife. We hit it off right away, and everything went smoothly. My wife worked as a hairdresser in a ladies' beauty store while I worked for a construction company. We were both looking forward to a peaceful and happy life and were satisfied with our earnings. For 2 years my wife and I were married. I never suspected my wife was cheating. It was like a dream when I discovered she was cheating on me. My wife enjoyed getting out with her friends at least once a week, and he would frequently go out as a group on Friday evenings, plan a picnic on Saturdays, or even hang out at a bar. I was not a socialist. My wife and I didn't have many friends, but I did have one coworker with whom I was quite close, and he was almost like my best friend. Before I discovered that my wife was cheating on me, I noticed a few red flags. For example, my wife, who used to be chatty and would share the latest gossip with me every time she got home, has suddenly become reticent. She only spoke when I asked her a question, and her talk seemed forced. I despised the way she made me feel like she was doing me a favor. Whenever we chatted in the bedroom, she began whining that I liked being intimate too much and that life did not center around being intimate all the time. If she wasn't whining about that, she'd say she wasn't in the mood. She continuously made one excuse after another. When it first started, I assumed she was acting that way because she was stressed at work and had indirectly expressed her frustration on me. I didn't act right away, because I was hoping she'd change her mind. There was a period when I believed I was the problem, and I began to question myself. I observed how I spoke to her, my tone, and even my behavior around her. I was a domineering person by nature, but I always attempted to communicate with her as a wife, and I was cognizant of my tone at all times. I even went so far as to take her out to fancy restaurants. Since she complained that I was becoming boring, so I stopped doing the things we used to do while we were dating. I tried everything I could to rekindle her love and return us to our happy place, but nothing worked. She didn't appreciate whatever I did, so I simply stopped. When I stopped, I became more aware of her body language. For example, if I attempted to hug her from behind, as I used to, she would push me away with her elbow and appeared disgusted. This happened at least 3 times before I realized something was amiss. Meanwhile, I noted that she would dress nicely whenever she indicated she wanted to go out with her friends. It's not that she didn't dress nicely before, but she appeared more eager and took longer to apply her cosmetics. And here's the truth. I thought she was seeing someone owing to her changes, and I intended to confront her once I had confirmation. I wasn't the type of man who would wait 10 days for fraternity to plot his foolish retribution. Before confronting her, I had significant anger issues and wanted to teach her a lesson. One weekend I was at home wondering about how to find out if my wife was having an affair behind my back. Our relationship had deteriorated to the point that we were practically like male and female roommates living together. We only spoke with each other for vital reasons. I watched my wife dress up, do her hair, and apply cosmetics before she left. She stated she was going out with the girls and then left. My intuition told me she was lying. I'm not sure why, but I strongly suspect she was lying. So after she left, I contacted one of her pals and pretended to want to talk to my wife. I stated I continued phoning a number, but she was not returning my calls. When I told everything to her friend, she was perplexed because she lived across the country and had no plans to meet with my wife that weekend. Her buddy also stated that before they all went together, they would announce it on their secret WhatsApp group conversation, but there was no notification and she was certain that my wife was not hanging out with the other girls. They would announce it in their private WhatsApp group chat, but there was no announcement and she was certain my wife was not hanging out with the other girls. I immediately heard this. I knew she had either gone to see her partner or had to be somewhere else. I wasn't even concerned about finding her, because I knew I could follow her using GPS without wasting time. I left the house and followed her GPS, which directed me to a football stadium to confirm this. I noticed my wife's car parked outside and knew she was present. There were numerous people in the stadium, making it simpler to find her. I was surprised to see her with her little sister's high school football coach, and she was in his arms laughing and kissing him frequently. The image alone made me enraged. I wanted her to know I had seen her, so I walked her into the AP, took out my phone and began filming as I proceeded towards them. I even spoke in the video as if I was addressing her parents and showed them what a nasty girl they had raised. When my wife heard my voice, she turned to face me and grew pale when she noticed me. She was completely idiotic to call my name and inquire what I was doing there. I went straight at the football coach. At the time I was not thinking clearly. I was furious and pounded the crap out of him, but happily some people noticed us and separated us. My wife wasn't sure if she should beg or stop me. She stood there in disbelief, unable to speak. I was hurt, but I tried not to express my feelings until I arrived home. When I returned home, I cried a little and spent a lot of time throwing out her belongings on her yard. I also emailed the video I captured to her parents, who were really disappointed and unhappy with. Her sister was the most disappointed, because she couldn't believe my wife was having an affair with her football coach. My wife did not return home that day. She returned home the next day and started hammering on my door, hoping I'd allow her in so could talk. I threatened to contact the police if she didn't leave my property, and when she didn't I did. She even protested and acted aggressively, so they pulled her away. A few days later I received messages from Facebook and it was my wife contacting me with a new Facebook account. I had blocked her old Facebook account and she begged me to accept her back and let her explain everything she claimed. I was always weary when I got home from work and I didn't offer her the care and time I used to, which led her to seek attention elsewhere. She also stated that she loved her AP less than she loved me and that she was only with him because of how he made her feel. I was slightly sorry to hear it, but it did not change the fact that she had betrayed me by cheating. When I told her we were getting divorced, she pleaded with me not to make a decision. I might later regret and to give her another chance. How daring of her. Long story short, we divorced and her parents disinherited her. Their partner's parents reported him to the school and the school was tired of hearing various parents complain about the same thing, so he got fired. Even if this happened a long time ago, I've moved on. It still hurts. For the time being, I've decided to divert my attention away from my misery and into something more useful. I no longer have time for ladies and I doubt I will anytime soon. Did your wife really tell you not to make any decisions you'd regret after she cheated on you? Divorcing her was, in my opinion, one of the best moves you ever made. It's horrible that she had no remorse for cheating on you and even attempted to excuse her behavior. I'm pleased you moved on and used all that misery to become more productive. Teeth and you for sharing your story with us. Story 3. I'd want to relate my tale because my ex-wife, with whom I expected to spend the rest of our lives, cheated on me. My wife and I were lovers since college. We met as freshmen in college and her love story began 2 years later after she graduated and got excellent paying jobs. My wife and I officially married. We had always looked forward to being married, especially her. She was looking forward to wearing a wedding band and a beautiful gown, so we had a little wedding and began anew back in college. We both took different courses and, as expected, had different jobs. My wife was a businesswoman and I worked as an electrician. She worked as a business consultant and we were both comfortable. We divided the costs equally and shared the duties. I was not the type of man to leave all of the housework to her, so I made an effort to assist whenever possible. I did this because I knew she was often fatigued when she got home from work, so we devised a plan to make things easier, since we still lived in the same state where we went to college. We achieved this by organizing a hangout or get-together for all of us who were close college friends in order to prolong our connection and bond. We didn't do this all the time. We scheduled it every 3 or 4 months. Most of the time we stretch it to the end of the year to give ourselves enough time to prepare properly. It was never anything major. We were merely trying to catch up and help each other in every way we could. We did this starting the following year. We left college and continued to study even after we married. There were always those who couldn't make it to our hangouts because they were either in another state too busy at work or lived in a different nation. While my wife and I were still in college, there was one man that I didn't like. He likes to brag. My wife had a history before we met. I didn't like him because I felt like I was constantly competing with him for my wife's attention whenever he was around. I know it seems insecure, but when I had to ask my wife to choose between him and me in a relationship and she chose me, I asked her to stop talking to him and cut off all communication with him, and she did. We had been married for nearly 3 years. When I observed my wife's behavior changing, she wasn't cold. She simply appeared less concerned about what was going on with me before I recognized her changes. We used to be extremely close and we spoke and gossiped about everything, but she simply changed and I couldn't help but notice it, even when she began acting differently. I never suspected she was cheating on me. I just assumed it was one of her nasty mood swings and that she will return to her normal self over time. One day after returning from work and unwinding, I decided to check into my Facebook account on her home computer. I didn't have the Facebook app on my personal phone or computer since I was a social media addict and the only way I could stay productive was to delete the applications and download them on our home computer, which meant I could only surf social media in my spare time. In truth, this was a small productivity rule. My wife and I followed suit, so we only used our house computer for social media such as Facebook and Instagram. On that fateful day, when I was going to enter into my Facebook account from a computer, I noticed that my wife's account was still active. Initially, I only wanted to log out on her behalf, but my curiosity got the better of me. She had a lot of unread messages, so I decided to take a short look at who she had been talking to and what kind of talks they had. To my amazement, I discovered that my wife had been speaking with the same college acquaintance she had an affair with before we met. I was surprised to read the flirty discussion between my wife and this person she knew I didn't like, so I went down to talk. I discovered that they had been seeing each other on a weekly basis and she was even planning to travel to his apartment later that week to catch up and finish what they had left unfinished the previous time. Everything seemed funny to me at the time. I was giggling in surprise as I read their chat. I couldn't believe my wife had been cheating on me for months, as I waited for her to be herself again. After a few minutes of considering all the conceivable reasons my wife could have cheated on me, I realized there was no justifiable reason for her to betray my confidence in that way. I got so enraged that I took images of their chat with my phone. I wanted to repay her for the agony she had given me. So I changed her Facebook password, and because her email was already locked in on the computer, it was simple for me to reset her password. After that, I put images of their chat on her Facebook page posed as my wife and declared to the world that my wife was a cheap cheat and that I had wrecked my marriage by cheating on my loving husband. After that, I checked out of her account and walked into her room to pack my belongings. Later that evening, when she arrived home, she approached me while I was quiet and drinking and she began to tell me about receiving calls from some of our mutual Facebook friends about a post she had made on Facebook. She said that someone hacked her account and created that post to damage her marriage. She even attempted to get in, but when she couldn't find the correct password, she assumed her account had been hacked. I said nothing while she spoke. I kept drinking and watched her talk and gripe until I was satisfied. I informed her. I knew she was cheating on me, with the same person she had a relationship with in college, and she denied it. To demonstrate how manipulative she was, she began to cry and stated, "I believe strangers post online, not me." I had no idea when I started laughing, and she was surprised to see how I reacted. I couldn't pretend everything was fine, so I admitted I was the one who created the post and voiced my disgust in her. After talking, I walked into her room, collected my belongings and left her after I departed. She kept calling. She promised to explain, but I was confused and didn't give her a chance. Weeks passed and I did not answer or return her calls. Aside from being sad, I began drinking and took a long time to stop because of her dishonesty. My wife's betrayal will not sit well with me. It wrecked my life. I don't understand how someone can be duped and then move on as if nothing happened. I tried, but the more I tried, the worse my emotional state became. She even said she still loved me and that I shouldn't allow her small mistakes spoil their future together. I still loved her, but I knew I couldn't be with her. We divorced and I moved on with my life. I am still pleased that she was ashamed and all of her pals were the same type of person she was and they judged her. When I recall how she played me for a fool, I wish she had the most terrible life possible. I'm so grateful my buddies were there to support and speak reason into me. If not, I might have taken her back and not told this story. Her ex-partner, on the other hand, dumped her because he preferred their romance while she was still married. I've moved on, yet I am still terrified of women. The only ladies I can continue to love are my mother and sisters. I've learned the hard way that true love and loyalty only exist when it comes from a dog or cat. People deal with heartbreak in different ways, and yours was through booze. The most essential thing is that you quit and get your life back. Women are unpredictable, and having a pet is generally preferable to ending up with a dishonest spouse. It's excellent that you divorced her and moved on, because it's foolish to hold on to angry memories from the past when you have your entire life ahead of you. I'm still worried about my wife. We met in high school and have been together since our junior year. We met in art class and fell in love because of our shared interest in painting. It was both of our goals to attend art school and someday sell our work for a living after high school and college. We worked hard to pursue that dream. However, becoming a successful painter is a highly competitive vocation. Therefore, we were unable to succeed in that regard. We both got other careers and eventually found satisfaction in different fields. I am a twin. I have an identical twin brother and we are practically impossible to tell apart. It's been a funny joke our entire lives and we've both grown accustomed to being misunderstood by those around us. There have been times in our life when our partners approached the wrong person to say something and we had to correct them. My wife would always make jokes about how she almost kissed my brother or how she was afraid she would go into bed with the wrong twin. Everyone laughed it off because it was a ridiculous concept. My twin would never allow it to happen. At least that's why I felt my brother was my best buddy in the world. We were the most stereotypical twins you could possibly imagine. I was the good twin, while he was the evil twin. He was the one who was constantly getting into trouble while I was around to make up for his mistakes. He married almost a year after I did. I'm not proud of this, but because he was my brother and I wanted the best for him, I ended up covering for him after he cheated on his fiancée. It happened during his bachelor party. He was completely trashed and ended up meeting up with another random woman in the bathroom of a nightclub. He told me about it later, as if it were the funniest thing in the world he didn't even recall. The following morning I told him about it and he begged me not to tell anyone. I pledged to maintain the secret, rationalizing it as a drunken error that did not need to potentially ruin his marriage. After all these years, I can't stop thinking about. It was quite simple for him to make a mistake at the time, and I can't help but wonder whether that was the only occasion since my brother and I moved away. We've made it a habit to celebrate the 4th of July together. We would always alternate whose house we would visit and we would go all out over the holiday weekend. It was always good to get together and catch up. Everything seemed typical at the start of the weekend. We've all caught up, barbecued on the grill and put off some fireworks. All of the grown-ups had several drinks and it was a good time. Near the conclusion of the evening when I spotted them, my wife was stepping out behind my brother, hugging and kissing him. She had quickly begun kissing the back of his neck. I yelled at her, claiming she had the incorrect twin. They swiftly moved away from each other and laughed it off. My sister-in-law and I were also giggling. My wife and brother both stated that they believed it was their lover. It was a little unsettling, but I believed her. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I heard my wife get up and leave the room. I believed she was going to the restroom or getting water. It wasn't unusual, but she didn't return for quite a while. After approximately 10 minutes, I became inquisitive, so I got up and went to look for her. I did not see her anywhere in the home. I walked back upstairs to contact her and noticed her phone was still on the nightstand. While the screen was lit up, I noticed that there were a few unread messages from my brother. I took up the phone and looked at them, realizing it was only moments before she walked out of the room. I opened her phone to check through the messages and I noticed one that read, "Are you serious about what you stated before? Because I honestly think you are attractive." My wife responded that she was serious and he urged her to meet in the garage. My brother had a detached garage in his rear, which explains why I didn't see her around the home. Their messages were pretty scary. It was only a brief chat in the texts, but it appeared that they were ready to do something in their garage. I dashed to the garage as quickly as I could to catch them and whatever they were doing. As I stepped outside, I noticed that the lights within the garage were on. As I looked through the windows, I didn't see any of them at first, but I did notice one of the cars shaking back and forth. My gut told me they were sleeping in the car together. I unlocked the side door and looked inside to confirm that I was correct. I had the forethought to snap one photo of them before opening the door and dragging my brother off of my wife. They were both surprised to see me, but they quickly covered up and tried to apologize. We got into a full-on yelling match. I yelled at my brother and threatened to hurt him. My wife tried to calm me down, but I was yelling at her and everyone else in the home heard it. So my sister-in-law went out to check what was going on. When I explained everything, she joined in on the debate. We were fighting and one of our neighbors called the cops. No one was charged with anything. The cop that arrived simply did his best to separate us and the situation became peaceful. I ended myself driving out alone that night to attempt to relax without being near my wife or brother. When I returned the next day, my brother and wife had been kicked out of the house. I spoke with my sister-in-law, who informed me that she couldn't be around any of them, so she forced them go. I got numerous missed calls from my wife, but I ignored them all. I spoke with my sister-in-law before everyone else to see how she was feeling. When she asked my wife why she would do that, she said it was something she had always wanted to do. Near the end of our conversation, I told her what had transpired during my brother's bachelor celebration. She was hurt that I hadn't mentioned anything before, but I believe that was the final nail in her coffin. It simply didn't make sense to either of us. My brother and I are identical twins. There was nothing about my brother that I didn't share in terms of appearance, and after a few days I was back at home and ready to talk to my wife. I intend to inform her that we were getting divorced and she would have no voice in the matter. When I pressed her for clarification, she explained that it had always been something she wanted to do because we were twins. She wanted to sleep with us both. She had been fascinated about how similar we were in various aspects. I became increasingly frustrated with her as she tried to explain herself. It definitely seemed like she had a thing for it. I contacted my sister-in-law and asked how things were doing between her and my brother, to which she replied that she was divorcing him. We both went through with our divorces, putting my brother and wife in a difficult situation. My wife was compelled to take on a second job to help cover some of the expenditures she would have to pay on her own. We were only renting, so we didn't have to go through the hassle of separating much of our possessions. We now have joint custody of our children and we're working together to establish some common ground so that they can live a semi-normal existence. I don't speak to my brother anymore honestly, that hurts more than anything else. Everybody else in my family is furious with him for making such a schism. Op. I can't believe you went through all of this. Having your boyfriend cheat on you was already terrible. However, losing someone you care deeply about, such as your own twin brother, is painful. I can't imagine how it would feel to lose both of them at the same moment. Your wife's justification for cheating on you is completely ludicrous. It's unfathomable that she'd be willing to abandon the life she'd built for a one-time romance simply out of curiosity. I agree, she must have had some sort of fetish or fixation. It's terrible that you also lost your brother during this time. It appears like you two were really close, and it must be difficult to create a new balance in your life. I realize your family will need some time to recover before you can even begin to discuss this seriously. I hope you're all doing well today so you can go forward in the future. Story 5. My girlfriend and I had been together for 5 years and I had planned to propose to her before this happened. We met in college and now that we've graduated and have good jobs, it seems like the right time to move forward. She was pretty much everything I wanted in a partner. She was kind and funny and she always prioritized others over herself. I'd wanted to start a family almost my entire life, and she seemed like the ideal partner to do so with. She wasn't the first woman I'd been with, but I was the first man she'd been with. Just a little backstory about myself. I've never felt the desire to have sex that many other men do. I see in popular media that it's almost like a compulsion for many men. Some friends have always made me feel uninterested in it. I've come to the conclusion that I might be asexual. I don't mind sex. I've had it several times, but it's usually something I do solely for the sake of the relationship. When my girlfriend and I first started dating, she told me that she assumed I didn't like her because I never made a move on her. I've never been the one to start anything, because I simply don't think about it. When I told my girlfriend I thought I might be ace, she was a little upset. She wasn't sure what it meant for a relationship if I did not want to have sex. I understood her concerns and told her that if she wanted to find someone else who could be more aggressive sexually, I would be there for her. Of course, I told her we were breaking up but could still be friends. Following a lengthy discussion, we decided to continue our relationship. I still had sex and I had no problem with it, so we agreed that she'd just have to be more upfront about when she wanted it. I understand that this sexuality may be confusing, so let me explain briefly before moving on. I am a sex-neutral asexual, which means I have no aversion to sex. I just don't feel the need to have it. Some asexuals are romantic and have no desire to be in any relationships. Some people like me still want to be in a relationship with a partner. I'm emphasizing this because I was very vocal about it. Following our conversation, we quickly returned to normally a couple of times a week she would initiate sex and we would have it, as we always did. Over the course of 6 months, she gradually stopped initiating it again. I didn't think about it too much with we were watching TV together. When a sex scene came on, suddenly a realization struck me. I asked if everything was fine and she said it was. I was concerned when I realized we hadn't had sex. I could tell it was something important to my girlfriend and she had a great time. I couldn't help but worry that she got it somewhere else. I let the days pass and she had yet to initiate sex with me. Finally, I asked her about it directly. She explained that she simply wasn't in the mood, but that there was nothing wrong. Hearing her say it outright made me feel better. At least that is how I felt until I noticed a mark on my neck. She was obviously trying to hide something. She made up with the collar of her sweater and rubbed it off slightly. It was clearly some kind of hickey. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I just pretended like I didn't see anything. I knew I needed to try to figure out what was going on before she continued to lie to me. She had lately started taking yoga classes and after some thought I noticed that the dates matched with times when we hadn't been sleeping together. I reasoned that if she was taking the time to cheat on me, that might have been it. So I waited for her to inform me she was going to yoga one evening. Then followed her there. I was starting to assume she wasn't doing yoga. After meeting a guy at a pub, it was hard for me to make out who he was at first, because he was facing away from a window, but when they departed together, I recognized him right away. He was a friend of hers that we would occasionally hang out with because he was her friend. Seeing them together wasn't damning in itself. They could have just been grabbing a drink, but I didn't understand why she would lie about going to yoga. I needed to find something more concrete before I went to her with this. I followed them as they went back to what I figured was his apartment. While they were inside, I did a little digging on the guy. Since I didn't really know him too well as I did, I remembered that my girlfriend had even been chatting to me about how thrilled she was for his wedding. He had just been engaged to another woman. I truly hoped that if she was cheating on me with anyone, it wasn't him. Knowingly sleeping with your engaged friend is a bad thing to do. I couldn't obtain any information from observing his place, so I just returned home and waited for her to get back before I could even ask her how her evening was. She started telling me about all of the yoga stuff she's been practicing. She was lying to me entirely. When she went to sleep, I searched through her phone to see if I could get any evidence from there. I went to their text messages and I found a lot of troubling conversations. They had seen each other's nude photos. He told her that if he had known she wanted him, he would never have proposed, and she expressed her confusion about my sexual orientation. Their messages had a very judgmental and invalidating tone towards me. It may not appear so from this post, but coming to terms with this fact has had an impact on me. Hearing someone I cared about talk about it so casually was unsettling. I took a lot of screenshots, especially of the exchanges when you indicated not wanting to marry, and sent them to myself. I didn't know who his fiancée was. However, after doing some research, I discovered that she was a recent law school graduate who had recently accepted a position at a nearby company. I contacted her to organize a meeting claiming to have a legal concern. Thankfully, she had one free consultation available, which I took. When I met with her, I was clear about why I was there. I explained how I knew her and presented her the evidence I had. She was heartbroken about it, but she thanked me for informing her before she became legally bound to him for the rest of her life. She was often concerned about his relationship with my girlfriend. She stated that it was evident to her that they had feelings for each other, but because they were both in relationships, she did not believe anything would come of it. As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about how they were talking about me, and I didn't think notifying my fiancé was adequate retaliation. I wanted to do something that would really hurt them. As I already stated, I intended to marry her. I had the ring and everything. My partner adored the large romantic displays, so I thought I'd offer her one. I knew the man she cheated on me with was soon to be dumped by his fiancé, and I wanted my girlfriend to endure the same experience. I took her to a fine restaurant, and at the end of the night, I hired the band to perform her song. When it came on, she commented on it and I informed her I had planned it for the evening. I got down on my knee and pretended to propose. She was ecstatic and smiling while weeping everything about. Her reply suggested that she would have married me. If that were the fact, why would you cheat on me? I stood up before asking her the final question, telling her what would have occurred if I hadn't discovered she was sleeping with another man. Her face collapsed entirely and everyone who had been smiling at us turned away. I described how I knew everything, making no effort to lower my voice. One of the restaurant employees had to lead us out because we were raising a scene. Following that, I ended things with my girlfriend and kicked her out of our apartment. She has messaged me several times, imploring me to give her another chance. She attempted to justify her behavior by claiming it was my responsibility. I'll admit that a large part of it was that I didn't realize we hadn't had sex for weeks. When I told her from the start that she should notify me if she wanted out, it appeared like she wanted to be with me, while also sleeping with the other person, which I wasn't happy with. I ended up disconnecting the number, but she still calls me using the number she downloads. I'm going to change phone plans to obtain a new number and move out of my apartment, so she doesn't know where I am. I am so sorry. You have had to go through all of this. When you found your true sexuality, you were open about it and you gave your partner the option to leave with no repercussions given the circumstances. I believe that was one of the best decisions you could have made. Your partner clearly wants to have her cake and eat it too. It's evident she had feelings for you and was attached. Yet she ignored your warnings about her infidelity. And why do you do this? If she was dissatisfied with the agreement you had made, she should have told you and been honest about it. I realize how painful it is to learn that your spouse is asexual, but it does not have to mean the end of the relationship, especially if you were still having sex. It doesn't appear that her reasons for having an affair were particularly compelling. Honestly, it appeared that she had affections for that other person and was using her recent sexual discovery as an excuse to act on them. I hope you can open your heart to other relationships in the future, and I wish you the best. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.